Eala is the match that I was looking at, and there's people like wrapped around the stadium just trying to get in, which is pretty crazy. And I mean, it's cool to see and it's exciting, but obviously, for fan experience, I don't know because I'm not living that same experience. But hopefully, the event kind of continue.
Jessica Pegula, one of the most respected and consistent forces in women's tennis right now, didn't hold back. But this time, her intensity wasn't aimed across the net. It was directed at the system. She publicly called out the Women's Tennis Association, and she did it in defense of one of the most electric rising stars in the sport. Alex Eala of the Philippines. Pegula's message was clear. This wasn't about rankings. It wasn't about favoritism. It was about recognizing impact and responding appropriately when something special is happening right in front of you. If you followed Alex Eala's journey, you already understand what she represents. She's not just another promising player climbing the rankings. She's become a symbol of possibility, of national pride, of what relentless discipline and belief can create. In the Philippines and across Asia, she isn't simply supported. She's celebrated. The Australian Open, something extraordinary unfolded. Fans traveled from Manila, from across Southeast Asia, from communities scattered across the globe, all to watch her compete at the Australian Open. These weren't casual spectators filling empty seats. These were devoted supporters who booked international flights, arranged accommodations months in advance, and invested emotionally and financially just to be there. That kind of loyalty is rare. Most players spend a lifetime trying to build a fan base that passionate. Alex already has it, and she's only at the beginning of her career. Despite drawing one of the loudest, most international crowds at the tournament, Eala was scheduled on a smaller outside court rather than one of the main show courts. According to Pegula, that decision didn't reflect reality. When thousands of fans show up specifically for one player, when energy is spilling out of the venue, that's not something you sideline. That's something you amplify. Pegula pointed out that Alex brought a global audience to Melbourne. When those fans arrived, ready to wave flags and turn the stadium into a sea of Filipino pride, the venue simply couldn't accommodate them. People were squeezed in. Others were turned away. The atmosphere that could have elevated the tournament itself was confined by scheduling decisions, and Pegula's frustration wasn't emotional outrage, it was practical. Tennis thrives on storylines. It thrives on emerging stars and expanding markets. When a young player organically generates that kind of global attention, it's an opportunity. Not just for the athlete, but for the sport. Debate isn't just about one court assignment. It's about recognition. Tennis has long struggled to expand its reach beyond traditional strongholds. Here you have a 20-year-old from the Philippines bringing in an entirely new wave of fans, a demographic that sees itself reflected in a sport that hasn't always felt accessible. That's powerful. That's transformative. Pegula understood that. She saw the stands. She felt the noise. She recognized that something meaningful was happening, and she believed the tournament should have leaned into it instead of underestimating it, because when fans cross oceans for a player, that's not hype. That's impact. And if tennis wants to grow, truly grow, it has to meet that energy halfway.
That we're getting and making that still an enjoyable experience for them. But I did see some of the courts have like lines getting in and it seems really busy, and I saw some reports that it's some of their busiest.
Jessica Pegula did not soften her words. She called it what she believed it was: disrespect. Disrespect toward Alex Eala, and just as importantly, disrespect toward the fans who showed up in overwhelming numbers to support her. And when you really picture what those fans experienced, the frustration becomes impossible to ignore. People stood in long queues under the Australian sun, waiting anxiously for a chance to enter the grounds. Many had flown thousands of miles from the Philippines and across Asia. They weren't tourists casually wandering into a match. They were there for one reason: to watch their player compete on one of tennis's biggest stages at the Australian Open, but the court assignment didn't match the demand. The venue was too small. Capacity ran out quickly. Fans who had crossed oceans were left outside, trying to catch glimpses on distant screens or listening for cheers echoing from inside. Some missed the match entirely because they simply couldn't get through the gates. That isn't just a minor scheduling error. It sends a message, intentional or not. And the message felt loud. You're not quite ready for the main stage. Pegula argued that this was not only incorrect but insulting. Because if a player is drawing one of the largest and most passionate crowds of the entire tournament, then by definition, that player belongs on a court that can contain that energy. Pegula revealed something even more striking. She had been told that this was one of the best crowds ever seen at an Australian Open, and that the extraordinary turnout was driven largely by Eala's presence. Think about the contradiction there. The best crowd in tournament history. Unmatched atmosphere. Global buzz. And yet the player responsible for igniting that energy wasn't given the largest possible stage. Pegula directly questioned why Eala wasn't placed on bigger courts with more seats, more visibility, more space for the fans who had made enormous sacrifices to be there. It wasn't an attack for attention. It was a logical question. If the sport wants growth, why not elevate the moment instead of limiting it? She even hinted at something deeper. The possibility that the Women's Tennis Association might not fully embrace what Eala represents. And that suggestion is what made the conversation more intense. Alex Eala isn't just winning matches. She's opening doors. She's pulling in audiences from regions that professional tennis has long struggled to penetrate. Southeast Asia is a massive, passionate market. The Philippines alone has millions of young sports fans hungry for representation on global stages. That kind of organic momentum can't be manufactured by marketing campaigns. It happens naturally when people feel seen. If a 20-year-old Filipino player is building that bridge, bringing new viewership, new sponsorship interest, new excitement, that should be amplified. Instead, critics argue that the moment was constrained rather than celebrated. Novak Djokovic, one of the most accomplished players in tennis history, also voiced support for Eala. He called her the greatest tennis player the Philippines has ever produced and said she deserves full respect. More significantly, he acknowledged that scheduling and court assignments can influence the pressure and logistical challenges a player faces during a tournament. When a multi-Grand Slam champion steps into a conversation like this, it shifts the tone. This stops being a niche fan complaint. It becomes a structural discussion about how emerging stars are handled, because legends don't casually involve themselves in minor controversies. When they speak, it's usually because they believe something meaningful is at stake, and in this case, what's at stake isn't just one match or one tournament. It's how the sport recognizes, or fails to recognize, the power of a new movement rising from a part of the world tennis cannot afford to overlook.
Things like that happen. I mean, it's you could argue that it was, maybe a poor schedule, and maybe they could schedule him on a bigger court. Yes, but again, she's so young and she's just coming through. I saw the other day with Alex Eala, that's been a talk, and which is understandable. There's some players coming from respective countries, like she's coming from Philippines, which is now a big deal. She's been the biggest ever, tennis player from that country, which is a big country, and there's a big interest.
And here's the part that makes this conversation even more intense. This doesn't feel like a one-time mistake. For many fans following Alex Eala closely, it feels like a pattern. Not an isolated scheduling oversight. Not just unfortunate timing. But repeated moments where the system appears to work against her in ways that raise eyebrows. Take the incident during the qualifying rounds of the Australian Open. Alex was locked in a critical rally. She struck a shot that landed clearly inside the line. The mark on the court visible, the evidence right there. Yet the call came back out. Frustrating? Absolutely. But what happened next is what stunned people. Instead of awarding the point based on the call, officials ordered the rally to be replayed entirely. In professional tennis, that's not typical. A ball is in or out. A decision is made. Play continues. You don't simply replay points because of controversy unless there's an extraordinary circumstance. And to many watching, it felt like the rules were suddenly flexible, but what followed defined Alex's character more than the call itself. She didn't explode. She didn't lose control. She walked calmly to the chair umpire, composed but firm, and said, "I know what you are doing." It wasn't dramatic. It was measured. She stood her ground. Then she went back to the baseline and won the match anyway. She didn't just survive the controversy. She pushed through it and advanced all the way to the final round of qualifying. That's mental steel. That's resilience. Then came another moment. Her match against Iga Swiatek, multiple Grand Slam champion and one of the most dominant forces in women's tennis in recent years. For a young player like Eala, sharing the court with someone of Swiatek's caliber is already a milestone. But during a crucial stretch of that match, just as Alex was finding rhythm and building momentum, an official confronted her about items in her backpack. The timing raised serious questions. Whether procedural or coincidental, the interruption disrupted flow, shifted energy, and forced attention away from the tennis itself. When you stack that alongside the controversial call in qualifying and the smaller court assignments despite overwhelming demand, a pattern begins to emerge, at least in the eyes of her supporters, and that pattern doesn't reflect well on the Women's Tennis Association, because here's the bigger issue. Alex Eala isn't just another prospect on tour. She's become one of the most marketable and globally resonant young players in the sport. She's bringing Southeast Asian audiences into tennis in massive numbers. She's creating atmosphere, emotion, and global engagement organically. That is something sports organizations spend millions trying to manufacture. When players like Jessica Pegula speak out, and when legends like Novak Djokovic add their voices, it stops being internet chatter. It becomes a serious conversation about governance, fairness, and recognition. Pegula saw it. Djokovic acknowledged it. Millions of fans believe they're seeing it. And here's the truth. Alex Eala is not going anywhere. She's only 20. She's already breaking ranking barriers for Filipino tennis. She's already filling stadium sections with flags and chants thousands of miles from home. She's already proving she can compete with the very best. The real question isn't whether she will continue rising. It's whether the system will evolve with her. Will the WTA recognize that she's not just a promising talent, but a global phenomenon in the making? Will they match her impact with the platform she's clearly earned? Or will these controversies continue to shadow her ascent? Now it's your turn. Do you think the WTA is deliberately overlooking Alex Eala, or are these simply management missteps and scheduling errors? Did they mishandle the court assignments despite the massive crowd turnout? And will public pressure from Pegula and Djokovic actually push meaningful change? Share your thoughts below. And if you support Alex Eala, make your voice heard, because in modern sports, fan momentum matters more than ever.